you guys have done some stuff which, for better or for worse, some people love it, some people hate it. You've done like interesting things like invisible comics and stuff, which no matter where you sit on the fence with that, I would say that that's a very interesting collectible that does sort of appeal to a collector, and less the 1 in 100 variant speculator. Like, can you talk a little bit about like the bad idea? Like,
yeah, sure. I think that it's impossible for that to be a reader book. Obviously, there's no book there, right? It's a CGC slab series of acetate, transparent acetate with 2 staples on it to look like a comic book. But I think that what we saw that was interesting. Let me explain where it comes from, and I think that'll help explain what we're seeing in terms of the person that's interested in that. Most of the people, Bad Idea is a very small team. There's 5 people at Bad Ideas: myself, Adam Freeman, Josh Johns, Anthony Matano, Peter Stern. Then we have a slew of creators, a bunch of freelance creators. But in terms of the team itself, the core publishing team is 5 people. Normally, a company doing the kinds of things we're doing, you'd be 35 people. So we all work very hard, and that sometimes we're a little slow with things because of that. We all worked, with the exception of Anthony, we all worked at Valiant together. Anthony's been in the industry a long time. He was at a retail store, Maximum Comics. And we did Valiant the way that a lot of publishers, basically all publishers, approach publishing, which is, let's try and be a mini Marvel. What percentage of Marvel can we be? Can we be 1% of Marvel? Great, we have a successful company. We did everything the way you're meant to, and it worked very well. We were very lucky, won a lot of awards, sold a ton of books. But now starting our own company, we didn't start Valiant. We lived in someone else's house, the house that Jim Shooter and Bob Layton and Barron Smith and David Lapham, all those guys built. Building our own house, we approached it with this point of view of, well, we're inside the business. In order to bring Valiant back, we had to really learn how to make the business work. So we have this point of view of how to make a better mousetrap. Let's try and do that. But let's try and do that in service of a bunch of people that are friends getting to make comics for the rest of their lives together, as opposed to let's take over the world. And with that approach, it would have been a little boring for us to do the same thing over again. So we kind of have a meta commentary going on with the industry. In terms of the invisible comic book, it came from this conversation. It came a conversation about people, we've all collectors, all slabbed collectors, I should say, have this they've heard this adage: don't buy the grade, buy the book. But there are tons of collectors that just buy, says 7.5, I'm going to buy the book. The book looks like a 6. They don't care. Or it's got a signature crease or a subscription crease or something on it. Oh, the signature's in the wrong place. Bad placement. They'll buy the grade. And the knock on graded books is, well, you've got a graded book, you'll never read it, which is ridiculous because there's 100 ways to read a comic book that don't require you to, especially a famous comic book. You can buy a trade and omnibus and central collection, digital. There's a lot of ways. Or you could crack it, I suppose. We thought, okay, why don't we take that to the extreme? Can we do a book that literally you're just buying the slab, not the book? And that evolved into the invisible comic book. And what we found was, almost like in a fine art, Banksy, Warhol way, people wanted to have that as a showpiece in their collection. Not necessarily to collect and invest in. There was a lot of that as well. But there was a lot of people saying, my collection feels like this is what I've been waiting for to complete it. They have a wall like you do in behind you. I've got a room, and they've got a spot that they've been in their minds. It's got a book and it's in their minds. There's something that's missing. And it's this commentary. And so we've tried to lean into that, and we've tried to poke fun of the medium and collecting and publishing and the way creators are and the way we are, stuff that we're also part of the problem for. We've tried to just put a mirror to it and say, isn't this interesting? And that was one of them.
What's your thought on expanding on this, but not necessarily having to speak to the bad idea stuff? Like, a lot of people talk about, the gimmick covers. Like, even if we go back to the 90s and we do like foils and die cuts and things like that, to me, it feels like there's obviously something fun about them, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with them in a vacuum. No. But obviously, like all things do, like if something works, people are going to chase those trends, and then it's, we're going to make a lot of them. Like, where do you think those gimmicks fit into the space? And then also, like, because on the flip side, here you are, like, you're making like true art, with Megalith, right? Like, it's like you guys are putting your heart and souls into this story, and then you have an invisible comic book too, or a foil cover. Like, where do those things belong?
I think they work. I think they work in concert. I think they can work in concert. When they do work in concert, they're greater than the whole. To me, they're very much like, I love movies. A lot of people love movies. My favorite types of movies, I went to film school, so they you watch a ton of very influential, venerated films, and I love those movies. And some of my favorite movies are things like The Bicycle Thief or The Red Balloon. But my absolute favorite movies, and most people I think would agree with this, are big Hollywood tentpole movies done correctly. My absolute favorite movies: Terminator 2, Aliens, Pirates of the Caribbean, Gladiator. It's amazing when the core character arc, all the stuff you need to make a venerated movie works, and then you've got this layer on top of it of commerciality and sheen, and then the marketing and the music and everything works together. It's really exciting. I think comics are the same way. I think gimmicks certainly have a place. They started as a solution for sampling. So when you have Amazing Spider-Man 389, 390, 391, 392, and someone new is trying to get into that run, they can't start at 1. Where do they start? Well, if you slap some foil on the cover, they're more likely to pick it up. That's their first book. They then learn, oh, this is giving me enough information to understand Spider-Man. I can now go forward. And over time, I can go back and try and find the great stories from the past. It worked tremendously well that way. For me, it works very, very well when they couple the gimmick with something to do with the characterization of the character. So the Ghost Rider Volume 2, Issue 15, the glow in the dark.
Glow in the dark, yeah.
It's I mean, like, who doesn't want that? Ghost Rider, the glow in the dark version, I think that's incredible. Things like that I think are great. We did metal covers, and we did them just for, when I was at Valiant, Exo Manowar, who's a metal character, Bloodshot, who's full of nanites, and Ninjak, who's got a lot of metal weapons, and we had all the metal weapons flying at the reader. When I left, they started to do them with much less effect on characters like Shadow Man, and I think that they struggled with those because there was not a connection to the character for the reader. They weren't excited about it. If you had a Terminator book, I'm just looking back here at the Terminator thing here. If you had this one here, if you had a comic book, Terminator comic book, in a metal cover, I'd be excited. If it was an embossed metal cover, I'd be very excited. If it looked like that, it was an embossed endoskeleton arm, I'd be excited. If you put that metal cover on Spider-Man, I don't know that I care. I think it's there's a incongruity, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
So I think they can work when, like everything, you have the right creative pairing for it. I think you have to treat the marketing with the same reverence as you do the writing and the artistry.
That's a really good way to put it, and something that I completely agree with you. If everything is holistically back in service to like the story or what the book represents, then it's cool. Like you said, you can have a die cut Wolverine cover and his claws are slashing through, and that makes sense.
Wolverine 50, amazing.
Yeah, so those are cool, but I think maybe where some of the allergy comes from a lot of collectors is when it gets overplayed and overdone. And like you said, it's not it is a gimmick for gimmick's sake, which I might have some sympathy towards people that have to make them, because I'm sure, as like somebody who has to kind of like penetrate in markets where there's a lot of noise. Obviously now you're not only are comics competing with other comics, you're competing with other entertainment. So like, are we in a world with comics where, whether it be gimmicks or some kind of big marketing thing, like even me, someone who does a Kickstarter, like I'm obviously marketing to like, I have to have a whole YouTube channel to be successful, to get people to back my comic book, or other people have to have Keanu Reeves literally like drawn in his book to be successful. Like, is that just the nature of entertainment, the beast? Like, you're going to have to get through in some way, or can we ever get to a point where a comic will just speak for itself? Like, it'll be word of mouth. It'll just be well read, and people are going to.
No, I don't think a comic will speak for itself. I hate to say that. I don't think it will. I don't know that it ever did. At least it hasn't been that way since I've seen it. But I think that barrier to entry for any entertainment medium is there, because people come to it because they love it, and they're willing to do anything because they love it. It's a passion for them. And so it's a lot of competition. But yeah, I think, unfortunately, I don't subscribe to the adage that if you make something great, people will show up. I think that if you make something great, it's the core. It's the first thing you have to do. Without that, it doesn't work. But you're not even halfway there. You've got to figure out the business. You've got to figure out the marketing. You need all 3 legs of that stool, or it won't work.
Thanks for watching this clip from SwaggleCast. If you want to see the whole interview, click right here. And be sure to subscribe to be notified of future interviews.